Ah, we're live. Joey didn't tell me. He didn't give me the countdown.
Oh.
I'll always wait for the countdown. Never mind. Well, welcome to another Wednesday night edition of the Carolinas Weather Group. We're getting off to a great start tonight, but we're proud and happy to have Dr. Jamie Mitchell as our guest tonight. He's going to be going into a little bit of talk about severe weather, tornadoes, hurricanes, and just the real risks with those and how they've affected the Carolinas throughout the years. He studied several storms that's come through the area, and he's going to talk about those tonight. So we're looking forward to having Dr. Jamie Mitchell on. I'm sorry, I had my list here on with us tonight. But before we do that, we'll kind of go around the regular panel, kind of let them introduce themselves and kind of talk about the weather in the Carolinas for the past week. I know it's been very dry, but there has been some locations that's got a little bit of rain, especially tonight in the high country. If you're watching us up in Boone or Watauga, Avery County, I know there's some flooding up there. So hopefully you're in the house and safe and sound for the evening up there. And remember, turn around, don't drown. And I'm sure Ricky will be able to be saying that on the TV. Well, he's not working tonight. He's off, so he's not saying that on TV. He's on there tomorrow. So also, we're expecting some more rain and storms tomorrow, so we'll get into that a little bit as well. I'm tired of blabbering on. This is a live show. Make sure that you are watching. If you're watching on a replay, you can ask us questions anytime. Send us a tweet or a Facebook message. Dr. Jamie can pass along his Twitter handle as well, and you can shoot those questions to him. You can also download this on our podcast here in the next few days once we get that up and going. So now that I've butchered this intro all together, it's all Joey's fault, so I'm giving it to Joey.
My fault on that. I had myself muted, and then I clicked the start broadcast button, and I couldn't unmute myself to give you the countdown because it wouldn't let me go through it. I had to either like close it out, and then
That was the worst opening to the show I've ever done. That's pretty bad. So it's all your fault, Joey. Go ahead.
It's live, so I mean we could go back and do it. We could start over, but it wouldn't. It's live. It's okay.
It is what it is, right?
Sorry, I mean, look, you're nowhere near as bad as Ricky is on TV.
we're all friends and family, so
it's just us girls, right? That's what the weather brains always says. Anyway, weather here. I'm over in Thomasville right now. We've not seen any rain or anything in the last numerous days. I can't even remember the last time it rained over here. It's been that long. I spent some time on the front porch with a giant fan blowing, though. It wasn't so bad. It was pretty warm, but the fan worked, so I enjoyed that. I saw a little bit of lightning the other day. That was exciting. I don't get to see that very often for some reason. But anyway, yeah, that's all.
What Dr. Jamie doesn't know is Joey's
is Scotty freezes. That's what he doesn't. Scotty.
Boy, this is off to a fantastic start.
What Scotty was saying was I have a bubble, and it follows me everywhere I go. So anyway, but on to someone who doesn't have a bubble and got to see some storms recently. Kit, why don't you jump in and say something? Tell us about yourself.
Please help us.
I don't know what bubble you're talking about. We have a ridge here over Belmont, and today that ridge prevented any thunderstorms from coming here. I don't know what it is, but like anytime we have a nice organized line of thunderstorms coming from any direction, it gets to like Cramerton or Mount Holly, and whichever direction it's coming from, it just splits or it dies, and it did both today. So we're still bad on rain. I've looked at the drought monitor, and South Belmont has the least amount of rain out of all of Gaston County. And as some of you might know, Gaston, Lincoln, and Cleveland are in a severe drought right now. So that's always fun, but I was looking at one storm over in Cleveland earlier today, and they got some good rain there. If any of y'all have been regular watchers, I'm finally at my house for the first time on the show, so that's why we have a change in background here. But on to someone without a background, I'll toss it over to Ricky now. You have any interesting weather?
Ricky's working tomorrow morning, so he's currently working on tomorrow morning's forecast, so I don't have to do it at 3 a.m. when I get to wake up. So, yeah, it's been decently active day up here in the Tri-Cities. I'm up in Bristol, Virginia. We had a few storms move across portions of North Carolina in the high country. Ended up with a flash flood warning for portions of Avery and Watauga County. Some flooding in the Boone area. Had a pretty gusty storm move through Johnson City that caused some wind damage there, but overall kind of just some much needed rain, and we haven't seen a whole lot of rain in the start of August, so our drought monitor and our almanac that keeps popping up at the start of my show says we're below average, but then again I look at the date and it's August 5th, so not many chances to have rain in the first 5 days of August. But regardless, I think we're going to get a nice good soaker tomorrow, and Scotty and Joey and maybe Kit, I don't know, it probably will go around him. We'll finally get some rainfall, it seems, too.
Yeah, it looks like we are going to get some rain, and Daniel's not on tonight. Daniel's our correspondent in the mountains of North Carolina, and there's actually it's been so dry in those areas that there's been two forest fires in McDowell County, and in fact, I believe, Joey, you said you actually smelled some of the smoke down that way, or got some reports of the smoke smell even in the central parts of the Carolinas.
Yeah, I know. I had a bunch of reports through the Catawba County weather page today. People said the sky was hazy; they could smell the smoke in the air, all the way into eastern Catawba County. So.
Yeah, so those forest fires are up there. Hopefully, we can get some good rain in the next day or so and help the firefighters out with that. So, without any further ado, we'll introduce our guest tonight, Dr. Jamie Mitchem. He is a professor at the University of North Georgia, and Jamie does a lot of things there, teaching some meteorology and some GIS, some geography, all kinds of things up there. And Jamie is actually joining us right now from Charleston, South Carolina, warm and sultry Charleston, that is.
Yes, very warm, very humid.
Oh, Jamie, we appreciate you coming on tonight. Kind of give us a little background about you and your experience in the field, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Certainly. So I'm originally from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Born and raised there, went all the way through high school, Dorman High School there. And my academic background, I went to University of South Carolina in Columbia. I got my bachelor's degree in geophysics. Because I knew I wanted to do meteorology, but there's not a meteorology degree in South Carolina. My junior year, I actually did an exchange program and paid in-state tuition to go to Florida State to take meteorology courses. And then I got my master's in meteorology at NC State, and there I studied under Dr. Steve Koch, who's now the director of the National Severe Storms Laboratory. And met some folks that you guys know. I was a TA for Mr. Nate Johnson in synoptic meteorology, and also went to school with Jamie Rome, who works at the National Hurricane Center now, and Steve Zalibi. I think he's a professor out at University of Colorado now. So it was a good group of people there. And then my PhD is at University of South Carolina as well. It's actually in geography. But what I studied were hazards geography, and I focused on tornadoes and vulnerability to tornadoes, including social factors. So that's some of what I thought we could talk about tonight, too.
Definitely. Jamie, I would have not invited you on this show if I knew you went both to Florida State and South Carolina, being that I'm a huge Florida Gator fan. And so is Joey.
Got you.
Yeah, I was popping on to say something too. Like, where we get this guest at?
I know. I'm sorry. Nobody else would show up tonight.
we'll let it slide tonight. No, great schools. University of South Carolina, great school, and so is Florida State, especially with meteorology. So, talk to us a little bit about your studies, Jamie, and what you found out with how tornadoes do affect the society in general.
Sure. So. I guess to kind of give you some reasoning about that, because I did switch majors a lot. Obviously, the bachelor's was because they didn't have meteorology, and I got a scholarship, and that really convinced me to go. There's the Florida Gator, I see it. And then when I went to NC State, I was working in the mesoscale meteorology research lab, which I enjoyed, and I looked at a tornado outbreak that actually happened in Arkansas back in 1999. Using Doppler radar to look for cold fronts aloft, using the veering and backing of winds that you could see with radar to convert that into temperature. and I enjoyed that, but I realized I wasn't doing exactly what I enjoyed personally. So that's how I got more into geography. I saw somebody else using GIS and in their research, and I said, that's really cool. I want to learn more about that. And I wanted to see how tornadoes were affecting people in particular. So that led more to geography. So when I went to USC, Dr. Susan Cutter is a professor there, and she's one of the big hazards geographers. So I started working with her, and they have two climatologists there. Dr. Kerry Mock, he does historical climatology, looking at past hurricanes, and Dr. Greg Carboni, who I had met as an undergraduate. And so I worked with them as my committee and was looking at what are some of the social factors that contribute to the increased likelihood of injury or death from any type of hazard, including tornadoes. And the number one in any hazard really is poverty. And so one way to address any increased deaths or injuries that we might see is really to start addressing the underlying issues, which could be poverty, it could be age, it could be gender, it could be people that move to the region and aren't familiar with local hazards or local geography. So I started to look at that, and that requires a lot of data. So you're looking at census data, you're looking at local information from emergency managers. So it starts to become very interdisciplinary, which is exciting, but also extremely challenging because you can't be a specialist in everything. So you have to bring in teams. You all know that, either journalists or emergency managers. So I think it's still somewhat of an untapped market for research to try to improve safety, because we still see there's issues. A lot of the focus is usually on technology, like getting better radars and getting better dissemination techniques. And we're really doing a good job at that, I think, as meteorologists. And there's a big disconnect on, okay, once the public has that information, how do we get them to take the actions we would want to keep them safe?
That's a very good point there, Jamie. What have some of the things that you've studied, especially here in the Southeast? We've had a population that English is not their first language. Is that something that you guys have in your studies? Is that something that you found a unique way or a different way of how to communicate those threats to the non-English speakers here?
Yeah, so a couple of things that popped up in the study. In the census data, they do include English as a second language, and even which specific languages. So a few things. One is that the warnings are put out in multiple languages, and it's not just Spanish, because you may have different groups, Vietnamese or whatever, in different parts of the country. So communicating that information in the language of the people of that region is important. But also there's a cultural aspect to that, where even different ethnicities may react differently to the same exact wording. So realizing who your audience is becomes really important, and that depends on where you are in the country or in the state. Some groups that particularly showed up high in vulnerability were Native Americans, actually, and Hispanics, and in some cases African American populations. A lot of the minority groups, but in particularly the Native American and African Americans came up pretty often. Actually, I did public surveys after 2 tornado events. We may talk about a little bit later, but one of the things that came up in both of those case studies was that the African American population was, in both cities, was less likely to understand the meaning of the tornado watch, what a tornado watch really meant, and the difference between a watch and a warning. So just a little bit on increasing awareness, making brochures, public education campaigns could go a long way to improving safety.
And Jamie, just recently with the technology increasing, I mean, now our cell phones, we can get tornado warnings to pop up via text message or an app, but not too long ago we didn't have that access. And the reason I ask that is the hearing impaired community. How has that impacted getting the warning or the meanings of communication emergency-wise out to those folks?
Yeah, so there's some amazing research about hearing impaired and visual. impairments and all kind of disability information, how to get the warnings to them quickly and effectively. So there's some neat technology about where the lights will be turned on automatically or flash when there's a warning for people that can't hear a siren or a warning beep on your phone. And there's several companies that are working on new apps and new technology, particularly for hearing and visually impaired folks. But the most amazing thing, I think, is the ones that control the lighting in the room. They'll, even if you're asleep, so that could be for people that, maybe are sleeping when there's a warning. If the light comes on, that probably would awaken you. So I think there's some amazing stuff out there. I'm not familiar with all of it, but there are a lot of people doing active research on particularly trying to reach those populations that honestly have been ignored, 10 or 20 years ago. And the technology with the phones, again, if you speak a different language, it's easy to translate into multiple languages, so that's really helped as well, because just about everybody has a cell phone. So you're putting the warning in people's pocket instead of just hoping they run into it on a TV or radio.
In your study, just a curious question, it's kind of a little bit off the beaten path. How many of these folks actually had weather radios in their homes or had access to weather radios? I mean, I know out in the Midwest, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, they're more relevant out there. But when you get in the Carolinas or even up northeast, I don't know what the access is to or the importance of weather radios are.
It's very few. That was actually one of the questions I asked in both of the case studies. First of all, NOAA weather radios are very effective if you have them. So if you have them, they do a great job, and that's the key. And in particular, I think nowadays, since there is so much poverty and people are kind of strapped with cash, when they see a $30 or $40 weather radio, they often are not going to buy it. That's not their top priority when they're at the grocery store or whatever. So one of the questions I asked was, how did people hear about these warnings? And in Indianapolis, I had 102 people that I surveyed. This was in the area that had just been hit by the tornado, and only 5 out of the 102 had heard about it on a weather radio. And in Georgetown, it was 1 out of about 50 people. So it's definitely not the top way that they were getting it. This was 2002, so this is a little old. But nowadays, I would probably guess that may even be lower. I think people are depending on phones, on TV. I hope, and I want them to get NOAA weather radios too. I don't want to say this is against weather radios, but I think we need to be practical too, that not everybody's going to get one. And I think people are depending more on social media, telephones, whether that's good or bad, and TV. We have to deal with what the public's really going to use.
Yeah, I'd love to get, I know Ricky's working on his forecast, but get his perspective TV-wise. But one thing I don't know if a lot of people know about, and I just stumbled across it, I actually have the NOAA Weather Radio app on my phone. Now, it's $9.99, and it's a one-time fee, so it's not the $30 physical radio that you can buy at your local store, but it does do a good job. I mean, at 2:30 in the morning, if there's a flash flood warning or a tornado or whatever, and there'll be a lady voice or a male voice, however you prefer. It'll come on and say severe thunderstorm warning for your area, and it's not as loud. It doesn't have the big old siren pitch, but it does kind of get your attention. So that's a good little app that I've found useful. I have it set for every city in my forecast area, so that's just another way that I get, if I'm asleep, I'm able to get that information. But you're talking about surveying people. How did they get the message of these tornadoes or these severe weather events? I'm actually going to write down these stats because I really think 5 out of 102 only heard on the weather radio in Indianapolis. I mean, Indy's in the Midwest. I mean, they're more prone to having a tornado or tornadic events out there, so that's an amazing stat.
Right. So that was one of the questions I asked. First, I asked, did they get the tornado warning, before the tornado actually hit their area? And so this, I think, was really eye-opening to me. So first of all, this was part of there's a program at the National Hazards Research Center where you can write for what's called a quick response research grant. They're about $1,000 to $2,000. And these grants are given to people to go study the event right after it happens, before people clean everything up and forget, what happened. So they're really good. They give, these every year. So I was able to get one of those while I was at USC, and you have to have a proposal. And so I was researching what happened in urban areas when a tornado hit. So I just had to sit back and wait for an urban tornado. And one hit Indianapolis, and I went the day after it hit up there. And I went to a couple of different locations. It actually ended up being the second or third longest track tornado in Indiana's history. It was on the ground over 100 miles continuously. So it was a long track F3 tornado. And I just studied Marion County, where Indianapolis is. And I interviewed outside a mall and then another location 102 people. 81% of them heard the warning, so that was good. 81% is a pretty high number. This was what was eye-opening to me. Of that 81% that heard the warning, only 41% sought shelter immediately, which is what we would hope they would do. And the second most popular answer was they continue with business as usual. And these are people that knew the warning and they still didn't really react. So I asked, did you feel that you were really in danger when you heard the warning? And 61% said no. So they knew the warning, but they didn't feel like they were in danger. And that was in Indianapolis. That shocked me. But the question you were asking, how did they hear the warning message? The most common was tornado sirens. So in Indianapolis, they have a lot of those. That's not true everywhere, no. But in Indianapolis, they're loud. They tested it while I was there, so you can hear it. And the second most common was local TV, and then the third was actually other. So it included things like radio, and there's a whole variety. So TV and sirens were the two big ones in 2002 in Indianapolis.
What's interesting is I can remember. I don't remember which guest it was. It might have been. It might have been Mike Bettis when we discussed this, when we talked about the Joplin tornado, but we discussed, and it was very similar numbers to how many people didn't react to the Joplin tornado until the siren sounded for a second time. And when the siren sounded for a second time, that's when they realized that this wasn't normal. This wasn't a usual thing. The sirens had sounded earlier in the evening. I don't know how long earlier in the evening it was, but it had sounded earlier, and they sounded for a second time. And then that's when people started to react more. I find it interesting how many people, like, literally have to see the tornado on TV, or they need some kind of confirmation before they make a reaction.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people would answer the first thing they did was look outdoors or seek more information. And sometimes you don't have time for that. That's the issue, is how do we make them realize that warning is put out for a valid reason, and now it's the time to seek shelter.
Now, Jamie, I want to play a little devil's advocate here. We've had Mr. James Spann on, chief meteorologist down in Birmingham.
Oh yeah.
And he's not a big fan of the sirens.
Yes.
With the boy cried wolf syndrome. You hear them so many times and you don't see anything, or you don't see that tornado coming. What is your thoughts on that? I mean, here in the Carolinas, we don't have tornado sirens. The first time I ever saw tornado sirens, actually, Joey and I was out in Oklahoma City, Moore, Oklahoma, back in February, and that was the first tornado siren that I ever saw. And I mean, they're everywhere out there, but here, I'm not used to them. I wouldn't know what the effect would be with our people here in the Carolinas. But overall, what is your perspective on those?
It's a lot like the tornado watches and warnings. I think it's all about the local culture and how familiar they are with tornadoes in general. So tornado siren in Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, is going to work because people understand and they face it more often than it may in Greenville, South Carolina. I think that's part of it. When I grew up, they actually did tornado sirens in Spartanburg. So everybody knew the difference between, well, not everybody, but we were trained in the difference between a fire siren, which was like one long sound, and a tornado siren, which is like up and down and up and down. They stopped doing that though because I think somebody told them or they saw something that it was not working, it was ineffective. Georgia, it's hit or miss. Some counties use them, some counties don't. We even have one on our campus. The first year I was there, we had a tropical storm move through, and there was a tornado that touched down right across the street from our campus, so weak F1, but the tornado siren sounded on campus, and we couldn't even hear it because the storm was so loud. It's so cheap, it's not the big tornado siren, but so I'm kind of split on them. In Indianapolis, obviously it worked very well. Theirs are big, and they have them located fairly evenly, because that's the other danger you pose. If you just have one or two, not everybody's going to hear it. And if they're counting on that to hear the warning, then you're actually setting up a system that may do more harm than good. In the South, I think it's a lot harder. If you have a city, it's useful because you're going to reach a lot of people. They have a small radius of sound, so it becomes quite expensive if you're not in an urban environment. So outside of urban areas, I don't think that tornado siren is your best way to go. But if you're in Charlotte, it could be something that could be useful.
And I was going to say, I don't know, and you probably know the answer to this, but geography-wise, I mean, here you have rolling hills and you have a lot of dense forests and stuff, and I'm sure that takes away from the sound.
Yes.
Expanding.
A lot like radar. You get the attenuation much like radar, yeah, and even worse with the sound waves, yes. So I think it's more difficult in the South. I don't think it's as practical as Indianapolis or Norman or flatter, more urban areas that get tornadoes more often.
Dr. Jamie, you mentioned that it worked well in Indianapolis, and to be honest with you, I'm going to kind of have to argue that it didn't, because the siren sounded, but the people didn't respond. And I think that's something that James Spann, that's part of his reason why he doesn't like sirens, is because his people just don't respond to them, or they get a false sense of security. They're at home and they feel like, I'll react when I hear the sirens, because if there's a tornado coming, the siren will sound. But then they're asleep at night, whatever, they don't hear it. Just those are kind of my thoughts on the sirens. I'm the kind of person that I think the more warnings we have, the better, except for the fact that too many people, and my phone just keeps going off, but that too many people get that false sense of security. Like, they're waiting, like that siren is their lifesaver. And so many people, like I said, 81% said they heard it, but again, only 40% reacted to it.
Correct, and that's, for me, I guess the only utility of the siren is to make people aware that there is a warning. But if they're not going to react to it, then what good are you really doing? Yeah. So, but that may come whether it's a siren or not. I just think we have a lot of problems right now where people just aren't taking the warning messages seriously in general.
Right, and I'd really like to dive into that data to see that if they got that warning. Let's say they got that warning because they saw a meteorologist live on TV doing wall-to-wall coverage. If they saw that, they react, versus a siren that they don't really react to. And I'm just wondering how much difference that actually does make.
Oh, I think it would make a difference, yes. Yeah, I don't have the data on that. I didn't, ask those questions. But, like, the coverage you see out in Oklahoma where they have a helicopter showing off in the distance, that you can't get any more convincing or compelling than that. Not that we can do that in the Carolinas safely, but I think people are looking for visual or some cue that it's really happening. And I asked that question in here, like, did you see a funnel-shaped cloud? Did you see the sky turn green? Did you have hail? And in most cases, they didn't get visual cues before it hit. So I think people need to realize the sky's not going to turn green every time, or you may not see it, or it's not going to hail every time before the tornado hits. So they do need to trust their meteorologist in some cases. And I don't know if that's the gap now. It's just that people, aren't trusting them, or they're just overloaded with other information. But it does concern me, especially after Joplin. That was a really terrible, strong tornado.
Did we lose him?
I think we lost him. I was wondering if it was my connection. Maybe he'll be able to hop back on, but some interesting numbers here that he's talking about.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, like I said, you were discussing.
Let me jump in here real quick because I've been. Sorry, we've got to. It's not picking up, but hopefully my mic's working now, considering no one else is talking. So I just wanted to jump in real quick from a broadcast standpoint and talk a little bit about maybe the perception. And I totally agree with the whole people need confirmation thing, because we've seen so many times how people won't act. The issue is, as he mentioned, a lot of times you don't have that confirmation. But I have friends who have told me, well, I didn't hear the sirens go off, so I figured it wasn't anything important. And so even in our small little group of friends who have me as a source of weather information most of the time, they won't really do anything until they hear that siren confirmation. Now, I think it's more, perhaps, on a communication standpoint, the fact that we don't tell people a lot of times to not wait for this tornado. We just, kind of tell them where it is. A lot of times we need to stress the fact that you won't see it. And around here in the Carolinas, it's rain-wrapped. You're going to have issues with terrain. You're going to have issues with, just there's probably a weak tornado, so you're likely not going to see a weaker tornado compared to a massive wedge. And if it is a massive wedge, it's probably going to look like a dark cloud approaching and not a tornado. So we need to work on that from a communication side, make sure we're telling people really what's coming and, that you won't be able to see it. And finally, the last thing is, it's just, I honestly think we have a whole issue in society as a whole to where we don't educate anyone about weather. I mean, think about it. You go through 12 years of high school. This is really just a problem with the whole school system as a whole, not really preparing us too much for life. But I won't go into that because that's a whole different show topic that's not related to weather. But we don't educate kids. We don't educate parents. We don't educate anyone about severe weather, and that causes a disconnect that continues to last for generation to generation. It'll never go away until we do a better job of teaching people. It's really an interesting topic that could be brought up at AMS, and I may have to go talk to one of our professors about that because it's got my interest peaked tonight. But until you start telling kids the dangers of stuff like this, or teach them, what a tornado warning is, you're not going to get a very good connection when the storm comes in. We have the EAS system that goes off once, and you hear the warning, and then it's done. You never hear about it again, unless you have maybe Scotty on the radio telling you. But the chances are the DJ is not going to have really any useful information. So yes, you may get the warning, but if you hear 20 seconds of it and that's it, they only tell you the counties once on the radio. It doesn't repeat itself. So you have one chance of hearing it, and then you're done. So there's Ricky's rant for tonight.
No, I totally agree with you, Ricky. It's a failed system because people don't really know about weather. I mean, let's look at the event that just happened up in I believe it was Michigan or New Hampshire, where there was a tent collapse. A severe thunderstorm warning was out, and those people, the organizers of that event, they didn't take it serious. They don't know the issues that severe thunderstorms can cause. I mean, some storms can cause more damage than weak tornadoes, and now unfortunately we had some deaths up there, and it's a whole problem with the weather enterprises. They believe that we are too passionate about what we talk about, but when we're honestly just trying to tell them, hey, there is a real risk with this.
Yeah, it's a disconnect in terms of... back in.
Am I back?
Yeah, I gotcha. As you left, I was going on a slight rant about our educational system and how we don't teach kids the dangers of severe weather and communication and everything. So Scotty and I were discussing that in the meantime, but we'll let you jump back into your conversation here.
And Dr. Jamie, I muted you because there was an echo there, so you have to unmute yourself to talk again.
While he's unmuting himself, that's something that maybe we can have that conversation on this show in the next few weeks or months to come. Is how we can get everybody on the same page. I know Joey's got some connections with the Newton Conover school system. We'd love to get some on-air personalities and maybe even someone from the academia world, Kit's there at UNCC, maybe one of his professors, and maybe we could come together and kind of bridge the gap on what we need to do as not only in the weather enterprise but in the school systems and public, how we can better communicate these actual threats that honestly and unfortunately are costing people their lives. I mean, no one really had to die in that accident at the circus, and no one had to die in the stage collapse in Chicago or get hurt. I'm not sure if someone passed away in that circumstance, but these things don't have to happen, if they would just take the threat with some serious, with some seriousness. Anybody?
Yeah, Dr. Jamie, you might want to turn off the camera because I see you're freezing a lot down there, and then also your mute button should be right there at the top of the screen. If you can hear me, that might help. If you turn off your camera, it'll help you with the lagging. All right. Yeah. All right. You're unmuted.
Okay. You can hear me?
And now we can hear you clearly. Good. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. And leave my camera off, you think?
Yeah. Just leave your camera off. It'll save you. It'll save you on the bandwidth, and you should be able to.
Okay.
It'll keep you clear.
Okay.
And Scotty, do you remember where we left off there when we lost him?
Okay, so I'm trying to remember what we were talking about.
We're kind of talking about the how the public perceives different information, and I was wanting to bring Ricky in to this conversation with him being on TV and the people that you surveyed in Indianapolis. How much did they rely on their local TV meteorologists to get the information about the tornado that was coming?
So the local meteorologists, let's see, in Georgetown, that was actually the main source, was local TV, the break-ins and scrolls at the bottom of the screen, that kind of thing. It was a smaller sample size in Georgetown, but and fewer people heard the warning at Georgetown. The lead time was only about 10 minutes in that case. It was 30 minutes in Indianapolis. But 71% of them got them from local TV in Georgetown, and 18% was other things like beeper and somebody at work, those kind of things. In Indianapolis, it was 46% got the warning from their local TV. Again, I think that was somewhat of a product of the time, 2002. I think those numbers might be a little bit different now. But that was still, one of the main sources, I think, at that time of getting information. I still think it is, too. Another key link, I think, that's important, a weakness, was people that were in their cars. A lot of them were not listening to the radio, and they were listening to CDs and that kind of thing. So travel, I think, is another kind of weak link where people aren't getting the warnings and maybe not seeking shelter. And that's a big deal, as much time as people spend in their cars right now, especially in the Carolinas.
That's true, Jamie. One thing that I was wondering about, and I'd like to bring Ricky in as well, is we have different scenarios. It kind of goes station by station case. Some stations stay on throughout the whole warning. Some stations just break in maybe every 5 or 10 minutes and kind of talk about the warning. What have you learned through your surveys about that two different styles of coverage? And then I want to throw it to Ricky and ask him what he prefers and what he has seen that's been successful for him.
Okay, for me?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. So I've seen both. I know, like locally, and I'm in the Atlanta station kind of network. We're right on the edge of it, and our bordering counties are in the Greenville-Spartanburg kind of network. So first of all, one of our problems is we're not covered by either because we're near the edge or the outer kind of peripheral counties out there. And I think that's a problem in maybe some of the mountain counties as well. They're up on the edge of a lot of the TV markets. So just getting coverage for some of the outlying counties, like in Atlanta, if you're not Fulton or DeKalb County, you get a lot sometimes. But a lot of times people would complain, in this wall-to-wall coverage that they're missing their show or they're missing the football game. And they end up flipping the channel after a little while. As a weather person, I love it because, I can't get enough weather coverage. But unless it's a really terrible event, ongoing, crossing the whole, area, maybe just breaking in sporadically, I think is better because you keep reminding people as it moves into a new county or a new area instead of staying on the whole time and risking people moving to a different channel. That's just Jamie, my opinion, though.
I see exactly where you're coming from, but let me kind of play devil's advocate here for a moment, because as broadcasters, one, we want people to watch. However, in severe weather, it's a little different because I really don't care too much about how many are watching. It's just who is watching. And so we end up with a situation where people tune in at different times because they receive the warning at different times. And so while breaking in and doing it every 5-10 minutes works, you run into the issue where maybe your competitor station is on the air when someone tunes in, so they flip the channel over to there, and then now from a news director and general manager standpoint, they've got them and not us. So there still is, I think, some competition, especially in the weather world and especially in these high severe weather prone markets.
Oh, yes.
Atlanta, of course, being one of the top 10 biggest TV networks in the world, you're unfortunately just going to run into that because you've got so many people in the metro to where they don't want to risk having them upset and angry over fringe counties. And we see that way too often, in my opinion, because it's just, a life's a life no matter where you live, whether it's a trailer park in some rural county, the metro, and a skyscraper, or out of your car for some reason, like Joey. But, sorry. But, I mean, that's just something I think we're always going to face. The TV issue is we need to get more live streaming, in my opinion. Live streaming is not maximized as much as it could, and I'd be interested to see if anyone that you talked to looked into that, because TV stations have the ability to do live streaming, and with so many people hopefully taking shelter, we should be pushing them to the live streams because then they can watch it from their shelter. Did you guys have any people who said they were watching on a live stream, or was that taken into account?
In these cases, we didn't. This was before live stream was very active. Mm-hmm. So this was 2002. But I know personally, I've watched live streams of people. The Storm Chasers, there's an app you can download on your phone and watch live streamers out in Oklahoma, Missouri, and so on. So I think from what I've seen of that it could be useful because they usually don't always have the tornado on their video, but they're showing you how bad the storm looks, how heavy the rain is, if it's hailing, causing damage. You'll see that on the live stream. Anything visual to reinforce the text message that you're seeing, if you're getting the warning by text or what you're watching on TV, I think is good. The more you repeat the warning, the more people hear it, the more seriously they take it. A picture's worth 1,000 words.
It certainly is, and we run into the problem with people who get upset with us to talk, saying we keep repeating it, but you hit it on the nose that maybe repetition isn't that bad of a thing, because a lot of people need to be told 5, 6, 7 times, hey, you should go do this, or hey, this is getting closer, you're running out of time, and now is the time to act. You may have 10 minutes before, but that 10 minutes has now gone out the window.
Correct. Yes, I think that's key. The repetition. One of the things that people would say in Georgetown when they got the warning is they thought this was just another bad storm. So saying that this is unusual. It's stronger than storms we've had recently or something like that. Maybe we provide a little more merit. I would think a tornado warning should do that anyway, but saying that this tornado warning, we need to take shelter right now because it's hitting your area, I think maybe that provides some extra oomph to the warning. The other thing that they mentioned in Georgetown that I thought was kind of interesting is they did mention a few of the people that they had survived Hurricane Hugo, and they felt like they had been through the worst event ever, so they didn't react to the tornado warning because they had been through Hurricane Hugo. I thought that was very strange as a meteorologist, but interesting to understand.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting. I guess people who survived or was really in the damage path of Hugo, I guess there's not really many more storms they think could be worse.
Scotty, that's very interesting because from experience in Burke County, that was a complete opposite of that. The people that experienced the Burke County tornado are fearful for every storm now that comes into that area.
Yeah,
oh, wow, yeah.
It really is the tornado that came through back in January of 2012. It's I don't want to say psychologically has played into the fact that they are more scared of storms now. They any thunder or lightning or wind or anything like that, they are fearful. So it's really interesting. But one thing I wanted to jump into, you were talking about being in a fringe county. How do those people in the fringe counties, in your opinion, how is the best way for us as the weather enterprise to reach those? I'll be honest, we started our own private weather company in the fringe counties of the Charlotte Metro DMA and the GSP DMA. I mean, we're right in between both of them. Burke, McDowell, Caldwell, Catawba. I mean, we don't really get the attention that Mecklenburg and Iredell and Concord, Cabarrus County, the 7785 corridor. We don't get as much attention as they do. So we have kind of jumped on the opportunity and created our own private weather company, and has really been successful. Have you seen that maybe take place in other parts that you've studied, or is that something that you think would be very, very beneficial to those who are living more on the outskirts of different TV DMAs?
Yes, the second question, I do think it would be very beneficial because those people are underserved, I would say. And one prime example would be Athens, Georgia. It's kind of on the edge as well of Atlanta's. And so they had a little TV station at the University of Georgia for a while, and they would have a weather, a student basically doing the weather on their station. And people actually watched that, in the local area because it was more localized forecast. And Toccoa, Georgia, I think somebody tried doing something up there as well. I think it was maybe via radio because Toccoa is right on the border of the Greenville, Spartanburg, and Atlanta TV markets as well, and also on the border of the GSP and the Peachtree City forecast offices. So it's not just that they're on the TV edge, they're also on the weather forecast office edges, which is double interesting. There is a market there, but I don't think it's big enough to be very profitable, which is maybe why it hasn't been done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, we're still trying to work on the profitability of it as well.
That's the hard part, I think.
That's the hard part. You try to do weather, but then you try to find some way to support your company. So, anyway, I know Kit has a question kind of different from this. So go ahead, Kit.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of pop back to the travel questions that we were talking about earlier. I commute to UNC Charlotte, and I follow the I-85 corridor through Center City of Charlotte. So I've experienced that metro area a lot on the highway. And one of the things I've noticed is, like, every once in a while they will have a billboard up that has like 15 minutes to I-77 at this rate. So do you think that maybe pushing a tornado warning or even just severe weather warning onto those panels would be beneficial, or would people not notice that?
That's a good question. I don't see any way that it would hurt. I think people do read those sometimes, especially they're getting more used to the Amber Alerts being issued on those. You know, they see those sometimes when a child is missing, that kind of thing. They'll put those on those boards. In Atlanta, I was down there for a conference one time, and so here's why I issue a little warning on it. They had issued a winter storm watch, I believe, but the sign said winter storm warning. I got really excited when I saw the sign, and then I went home and checked, and it was just a watch, and it didn't end up really doing anything. It ended up being canceled later, but I took a picture of it because I tweeted it out and said, are we under a warning? Thought we're getting something big. But what had happened was the Department of Transportation had put the message up, and they, I guess, didn't understand it was a watch and not a warning. They had put the wrong message up. So as long as meteorologists, I think, are involved in that whole process, it could be useful. I think it would be an easy way to reach a lot of people because people drive under those. Because radio's not always issuing the warnings, and so it depends on which radio station you listen to. If you're listening to the radio at all, whether you get a warning in your car, or if you have an app on your cell phone, that's a good way to do it too.
We do that
So
in
we
roads for the hurricane watches and warnings that are issued. I assume it's probably done through the Virginia Department of Emergency Management and the VDOT. They do put hurricane warnings up there now.
That's right.
How useful it is questionable because it just says hurricane warning in effect, doesn't really give you any extra information. We put more information about texting and driving up there than we do, with our hurricane warning. But I know the Weather Service in Norman has worked with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to also put those warning signs up, Kit and Jamie as well. So.
Yeah, I was getting ready to add, I've seen several pictures in the OKC metro area this past spring with, it actually will even say severe storms expected today, stay alert. It didn't even say a watch or warning, it just said severe storms expected today. And then obviously if a tornado watch or warning or flash flood watch or warning was out, they would display those. But I thought it was really interesting. It would just say severe storms expected today, stay alert. I mean, that's pretty awesome in my opinion. That's very very cool that information is out there. So if you're traveling I-40 or 35 out there, that you're able to get that. At least if you see it, maybe it'll resonate somewhere in the back of your mind later on in the day when you start to see thunderstorms form. You're like, oh, maybe I do need to be more alertful or pay attention to what's going on. All right, well, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say, I do think that's an area that needs maybe more research is people on the roads. Just like these outdoor venues, concerts, races, football games, places where people need to get the warning, but also not just get the warning. What would people do stuck in traffic in Charlotte if they got the warning? Where are you going to go? How would they know what to do? Or if you're at, the USC Clemson football game, how do you get the fans all into a safe area? I think that's an area that maybe is being overlooked. Wichita Falls, in 1979, they had a tornado F4, I think, that went across an interstate, and a lot of the deaths were in cars. So it has happened, and I think that's kind of an Achilles heel we might have right now.
Stick around with us, Jamie. Hopefully in the next month or so, we're going to get a show on that topic. I think Joey's made a contact out to an emergency manager, I believe, Joey. You'll have to come in with the information, but he actually just wrote an article on this. So this is a story that we're going to try to get an idea of how people go about sporting events and big crowd events, how they get the message out there and get everyone to safety.
Good.
All right, well, we're closing in on 9 o'clock, and I just maybe a quick synopsis of the tornado. The only EF4, is that correct, Joey, that came up through the Western Carolinas there in Cleveland and Lincoln County, Catawba?
Well, technically it was an F4 because this is before the enhanced Vegeta scale, but yeah, it was the only F4 to ever hit the Western Carolinas. There was actually, well, technically I guess there was two tornadoes because I think the one from South Carolina maybe crossed into North Carolina, and then there was another one that went up through Lincoln into Catawba County.
So, Jamie, if you don't mind, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, and then we'll close the show out.
Certainly, certainly. So May 5th, 1989 was this tornado outbreak that affected all the way from northern Georgia up through the Carolinas. One of the worst tornado outbreaks probably in the western Carolinas in particular. So it's kind of what got me really interested in weather. I think everybody's kind of born with it, so I was already kind of born liking the weather, but this kind of sealed the deal. So I grew up in Spartanburg County, and the tornado didn't hit our house or anything like that, but I do remember the storm. We had a basement, and we went to the basement, and we could hear the storm roaring, and it hailed, and the trees were bending over and everything. A really bad storm, but no damage to our house or anything like that. But then it hit about 15 miles, I guess, from us, and was a F4. It started out, I think they said 400 yards wide, and widened up to 1,000 yards wide. So we're talking, over a half-mile wide tornado, which is very unusual too in Spartanburg, and F4 strength. So we drove up to, this was around Chesney, South Carolina, and then it crossed into the across the North Carolina border there. I remember driving up there. My parents actually drove me up there. I was about 12 at the time. And one of the things I can remember the clearest was there was one of those big steel high-tension power lines twisted on the ground, and it went through a peach orchard, and all those trees were just uprooted and torn out of the ground. There was a brick house that had been swept back into the pond behind it. It was a slab house, but still a brick structure, and then lots of mobile homes that were destroyed. It killed 2 people in Spartanburg County, and then it went on through Lincolnton, a separate F4 tornado through Lincolnton and Catawba County. I think it killed 7 more up there. And then that same day, actually, Durham was hit by an F2. Indian Trail over near Charlotte had an F4 that day. And right near downtown Winston-Salem, the old town of Salem, got hit by a tornado that day. So lots of, highly developed areas now were hit by some of the most amazing tornadoes in history, really, in our part of the world. That F4 tornado, I can't describe. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the amount and degree of damage there around Chesney. Later that same year, was when Hurricane Hugo hit. I was again in Spartanburg. We got out of school. We had like 80-mile-per-hour gusts, but it wasn't terrible in Spartanburg. But we drove down to Charleston and up through Myrtle Beach. My parents supported my weather, passion at the time. It was probably about a month after Hurricane Hugo, and the scale of the damage was way bigger, of course, than the tornado, but the types of damage were actually very similar to what I was seeing in Chesney, but Chesney was actually worse. The wind speeds were higher in that tornado, of course. But it just showed me that it can happen in South Carolina. I think it's important that we remember that it is possible. Now, working in Gainesville, Georgia, I think it's always important. I try to tell everybody, Gainesville, Georgia was the site of 2 of the top 20 deadliest tornadoes in U.S. history. So one of those was an F4 in 1936 and another F4 in 1903. And Gainesville, Georgia is not far from, the Western Carolinas. So those types of storms can happen. Thankfully, they're very rare in the Carolinas, but the potential is there, and I think people need to know that and remember.
Yeah, and I also remember the May 5th tornado living in Newton, right in the center part of Catawba County. the tornado whiffed before it got to us, but I remember that storm had the trees. We had recently just planted new trees in our backyard. I remember them being just bent completely over from the storm. It was definitely, and you guys can probably hear thunder here, which is one reason why we're trying to wrap this up kind of quick before lightning knocks me completely offline and I'm hosting stuff. Ruins it. But it's starting to get very active here. But anyway, and then Hurricane Hugo, of course, was that I've told on the show many times. That was my weather moment. That was the one that got me interested in weather. That's the storm that hooked me. But Dr. Jamie, I always ask a final question to all of our guests. It's the same question. We have a lot of teachers, a lot of students, a lot of young people that watch our show, and so I always ask every one of our guests if there's one thing you could tell that teacher who's trying to, help inspire that youth to continue into meteorology, or that student who's wanting to continue into meteorology. What is the one piece of advice that you could give? That student or that teacher helping that student.
Okay. Good question. I would say if they're interested, they probably have that passion that all of you have and I have. It's just kind of in your blood, I think, in a lot of cases, that you just love the weather and the outdoors. So I think making sure you don't lose that is important, because you're going to need it to survive that education path, because that's really what's going to drive you when you're going to have to learn the math and the computer skills and, of course, the science. But I think for many people, the math and the computer become the challenge the further along you get. So remembering why you're learning that, why that's useful, and also getting experience along the way, not just depending on education. So making sure that you volunteer or get an internship or somehow get some experience, because that'll help you keep that passion as well once you really start getting to do it. My example I can give you was I was at USC, so I was doing geophysics, as I said, not really meteorology, but one of my professors got me a volunteer position at the South Carolina State Climate Office. So I didn't get paid, but I just wanted to be there and be around people that were doing what I wanted to do one day. And that ended up turning into an internship at the Southeast Regional Climate Center, which was in Columbia, South Carolina at that time. Now it's in Raleigh, I believe, or Chapel Hill. But that internship is where I really, got a passion for climatology too, and data, because they dealt with all the climate data. So I think getting experience is key. Obviously, learning the math as well, but the passion is really what's going to keep you in the field. And what's better than loving what you do, right? It makes work easy.
Exactly. And you mentioned the Southeast Climate Center. I always give a shout out to William Schmidt. Anytime we bring up the Southeast Climate Center, he's our go-to guy for all of our data. So he takes care.
Oh, wonderful.
He takes care of everything we need. I actually did an entire on our local parade, which went over 120 years without being rained on. We did
wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. We did an entire article on that parade. He helped me with all that. So anytime anybody mentions those group of guys, I always have to give a shout out to him. But Scotty, you want to wrap up this show, and let's let Dr. Jamie tell people how to get in touch with him and get this off of here before lightning cuts off my power.
Actually, I think we should stay on, because all we've heard about is there's a big bubble over your house, and now you're getting storms. So I think this may be interesting to watch.
Well, here's the interesting thing. It popped up all of a sudden. There was nothing on radar. It blew up, but it's moving away from me. So I can see all the flashes out my window right here, but it's working its way away.
No, that's cool. Dr. Jamie Mitchem, we are very appreciative you've come on. Very interesting show, and I'd love to have you back on to talk a little bit more about how geography maybe affects weather. I know there's some stuff out there in the weather world that talks about how geography affects weather, so I'd love to have you back on for maybe a show like that later on in the year.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, plug away your Twitter information and anything else, and we can kind of wrap up the show. Okay.
The two weather-related probably social media things I have are Twitter. It's at Dr. Mitchem, at DrMitchem. and I have a Instagram where I put sunset pictures and that kind of thing on there. So it's Mitchem121 on Instagram.
Awesome, very good information. So go out and follow her on Twitter and Instagram, and we are very appreciative of you coming on tonight, Jamie, and we look forward to having you back on.
Certainly. Thank you so much. You guys do a great job.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And next week, we're going to be talking about storm chasing out in the plains with Vaughn Castor and Chance Caldiron. Both of those guys are storm chasers out in Oklahoma. Vaughn works in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, and Chance works in Oklahoma City with KOCO with Chief Meteorologist Damon Lane. So that's next week. And then the 19th, we don't really have a show topic right now. And then August 26th, we kind of wrap up the month of August with Nate Johnson and Chris Michaels. They're going to talk a little bit about the AMS meeting back in June, and then we're going to get some information out of Nate with the AMS summer meeting that's taking place right now in Raleigh this week. So hopefully he can shed some light on those two meetings in the Raleigh area. So looking forward to those guys coming on. And as always, thank you for watching tonight. Have a great week. I don't know if I'll be here next week. I am going to be at the beach, so I don't know if I'll have an internet connection. If not, Joey and Kit and Ricky will take care of you guys, and we'll see you next week. Guys, any closing words?
Enjoy the storm.
By the way, we didn't sing Kit happy birthday. Yesterday was his birthday.
Oh, Lord.
Joey, close us out.
I was gonna sing Kid an Arabian stripper for his birthday.
Wow. No.
Yep, that closed it out.
All right, that's the show.
That's it, folks.